In this video, I'm going to go over how to make the Simplicity Learn to Sew pattern 2147. In this envelope, you have all the pieces needed in order to make the mini dress or the tunic. In this particular case, I'm going to be focusing on making this mini dress with the sleeves. What's unique about the Simplicity Learn to Sew line and what I love is that here at the bottom of the envelope, it tells you all the basic skills that are involved in making these pieces. So you'll learn how to make pleats, stitch a yoke, and so on. If you want to find this pattern, you need to go to a store that supplies Simplicity patterns and look for the cabinet, which is in numerical order, and then look for pattern 2147. Whenever you pull out a pattern, you're going to want to make sure that you grab the right size, and the sizes are always listed on the front. Right here, I have sizes 6 through 18. So as long as your size falls within here, then you're okay grabbing this envelope. So we're going to flip it over to the back side so we can get more information on this pattern and learn what kind of fabrics to use, how much, and what other notions we need. For a beginner, looking at the back of a pattern envelope can be a bit overwhelming and almost like looking at a different language. The good news is half of it is in a different language, this half. So if we just need the English version, we can just focus on this half. What's also nice is they have a picture over here listing each one of the items that they have in this envelope. You'll see a letter is associated with each item. We have dress A, dress B, which I'm going to be making with the sleeves. The tunic is C, and then the belt is D. Over on this side, you'll see it's separated by different boxes that give you different information. The top one is fabrics. These are the fabrics that they recommend you using in order to make these items. So you'll see here they have laundered cottons, eyelet, crepeback satin, and so on. Then you'll see the box underneath is the notions. Notions are additional items that you need in order to make these items. Here we have thread, so we need to buy thread in order to make these. We also need for A, B, and C, which again relates back to this. So it's for all the dresses. You're going to need one package of 1/2 inch wide single fold bias tape. For dress A, they also recommend that you buy 4 buttons. This is for decoration, so it's optional. And then for D, which is the belt, it's also optional if you want to get jewels or studs in order to decorate it. We're now going to be going on to the body measurements. We're going to get a little closer to that so we can figure out what size we need in order to make the dress. Next, we're going to be focusing on body measurements. This is what we need to consult in order to figure out what size pattern we need. You'll see over here we have bust, waist, the hip, and then from the back neck to the waist. These are all listed in inches. So you're going to want to find the measurements that are the closest to what you are. So if your bust is 34 inches and your waist is 26.5, and all these other ones line up, you'll just go down here and then you'll see the size, which is pattern size 12 in US or 38 in European. Now if you're different, if you're a bust size 36 but your waist size 26.5, I would go with the larger bust size here, so a size 14. The nice thing is this dress is like a shift, so it's a little bit bigger in the waist, so it doesn't need to fit perfectly. The bust is definitely more important here since it's the larger of the two. Now, if you need to get more information on finding your correct measurement size, you can visit our video which talks about measurements on ProfessorPincushion.com, or you can visit simplicity.com for additional help. Once you've picked your pattern size, you can then look to see how much fabric you're going to need in order to make your project. So if I'm doing a size 10, everything underneath this is going to relate again to the size 10. So the next thing is I'm going to look over again to my pictures, and since I'm doing dress B, I'm going to look for dress B over here. So here I have B, mini dress. So this is going to now tell me what I'm going to need to know in order to make this dress. So if I go to size 10 and I go all the way down to B mini dress, it's telling me I need 2 3/8 yard of fabric in order to make this dress. You'll notice under here it says 45 or 60. This relates to the width of the fabric. So they're saying regardless if you get 45 inches in fabric or 60 width inch fabric, you're still going to need the same amount of fabric. It doesn't matter. The asterisk behind it relates to nap. Nap is fabric that has a texture like velvet or corduroy. So that this asterisk is telling me is they're taking fabric with nap into consideration. So regardless if your fabric has nap or not, or if your fabric is directional or not, you're still going to need the same amount of fabric. So this is nice and simple to the point. Regardless of what the fabric is, you're going to need 2 3/8 for a size 10. So if you're doing the tunic, you'll see underneath it has additional information. So if we wanted to put lace in our tunic, we would need this yardage right here, and here's the width, 2.5 inch width of 1 1/4 yard lace. So that's all the information we need in order to make our dress. I'm going to go ahead and get my fabric 2 3/8, and then I'm going to get all my other notions needed, and we're going to get started in cutting out our patterns. Here we have an overview of everything needed in order to make the Simplicity 2147 pattern. I have my pattern, I have 2 3/8 yards fabric, the single fold bias tape, my thread, and then other things I like to have for my sewing box. My sewing gauge, fabric marker, scissors, and then pins and needles. The only thing missing here is the sewing machine. So now let's get to getting our pattern started. When you pull out your pattern directions out of the envelope, you're going to see a diagram such as this on the first page. Again, we have our pictures with the letters that are associated with each one. And then over here, you're going to see a picture of the different pattern pieces. Underneath these pattern pieces, you're going to see a guide here. Not only do they number, but they also label them. So you know that number 1 is the front, either the front of the dress or the front of the tunic. Behind it, you'll see a letter. For this example, we have a series of letters, A, B, and C. What this is telling us is that for this piece, the number 1 pattern piece, you're going to need it for pattern A, B, and C. So if I'm doing dress B, then I definitely want to cut out number 1. So anything that has my letter, which is B, I need to cut out. So just going down this list, I'm going to need the front, number 1, 2 is the back, this is A, so we just ignore this. Here's another B, so I need the number 5, the yoke, front, and sleeve. And then I also need the number 6. So I'm going to need to cut out 1, 2, 5, and 6. All these other pattern pieces I don't have to worry about right now because for my dress, I just need these 4. Pattern pieces are normally printed on tissue paper. So when you pull this out of the envelope and unfold it, you'll see it's a gigantic or 2 gigantic pieces of tissue paper. And it may seem like there's a lot going on, but you have to treat it like a treasure hunt. You're just looking for your pattern numbers. So here I've already cut away most of it because it was too big to even show on camera. But the main thing is on the pieces themselves, you'll again see a number. So they're all right there. So we have 1, 2, 5, and 6. These are the 4 pieces that I need. You're going to see underneath the number, it's going to be labeled again what the pattern name is. So this is the number 1 and it's labeled front. Behind it, it again has the corresponding letter which relates to the project it is. So it's dress A, B, and C. Because I'm doing B, I definitely want to cut this out. Before you go ahead and cut it out, you're going to want to make sure that you look at the lines coming off of the pattern because there's usually several sizes that is attached to one, and make sure that your size is listed as one of the lines. So here is the edge of number 1 pattern, and you'll see when it gets to this point there's a series of lines. Each line is associated with one size. So this line goes with 6, 8, 10, 12. So as long as my 10 is in here, then this is definitely the pattern piece I want. We're going to get a little closer so you can see this area a little better. At this view, it should be a little clearer now. Here we have the number 6 for this pattern piece, which is yoke, back, and sleeve B. So this, of course, is for the B dress. Now you'll notice on the number 1, there were several lines coming off the edge of the pattern piece. On this one, there's only 2. I wanted to point this out because on this, you'll see 10 and 12. That means that if you're a 10 or a 12, you would use this pattern piece. For a 10, I would cut out on this line. For a 12, I would cut out on this line. If you're a size, let's say 8, you're going to be looking for another pattern labeled 6, which has the line 6 and 8 on it. So that's why you got to be careful when you're cutting out your pattern pieces. I've already started to cut out my pattern piece number 6. Now when I'm cutting out, you're going to want to make sure that you use scissors that are alright for cutting paper. This means that you don't use your fabric scissors. Paper, even tissue paper, will start to dull the blades and make it harder to cut out fabric. So you definitely want to keep your scissors separate. So the next step is I'm going to cut right along the line that goes with my pattern size. So I'm cutting out 10, and I like to cut just right outside the line so I can still see the line and I'm not cutting it off. Technically, you can cut right on the line. Seam and hem allowance is already considered into the pattern, so you don't have to worry about that. I just like to still see the line in case I use this pattern several times. I know that the line is always going to be there and my pattern piece is not getting smaller. The other thing you want to make sure is you cut out your notches. These are the little triangles that are at the edge of the line. I have 2 here, and I just make a larger triangle. And then I have a single one here. This is a smaller notch, so it's just a tiny triangle. You'll see another one here, but this one is labeled 12 and this one is 10. That means for size 10, I'm cutting out this notch. I don't have to worry about this one because I'm not doing size 12. So all I'm going to do to cut this out is I'm going to carefully go right along the line like that. And then when I get to my notch, I'm just going to cut out a little triangle. Now if you want to make this a little easier, you can press your pattern pieces just to make them a little flatter. Just make sure that your iron setting is on the lowest heat possible because tissue paper is really light and we do not want to burn our tissue paper. We just want to slightly flatten it a little bit. So now with my notch, I'm just going to cut out a little bit and I'm just going to turn it, rotate this so it's a little bit easier for me at my angle. And then I'm going to cut the triangle this way. So I'm going to do this for all my pattern pieces, 1, 2, 5, and 6 on the number 10 line. And then we're going to work on doing our pattern layout so then we can cut it out of our fabric. I just want to point out, in the case of pattern number 1 and pattern number 2, you're going to see a line here and then one here, which I've already cut off. This is the cutting line for view C. This is the cutting line for view A and B. This means obviously that since you have a dress, you have a longer length. So if I'm doing dress B, I would cut here, or for dress A. If I'm doing the tunic, which is number C, or letter C, you're going to cut at this line here. Also on the pattern directions is a diagram that looks like this, which shows you how to lay your pattern pieces onto your fabric. It's separated by the project. So if I'm doing B mini dress, this shows me here my 4 pieces, 1, 2, 6, and 5, and how it's laid out on the fabric. Now the thing you need to be aware of, this fabric, regardless of 45 or 60 inches, is folded in half. Here it says fold, so this is the fold of the fabric, and here on top is the selvages. Now selvages, you can usually tell is the edge of the fabric, and it usually has very tiny holes all along the edge. I usually have my fabric with the right side on the inside of the fold, so this is the wrong side of the fabric. You're going to want to lay these pieces right here on the fold. If you look on the pattern pieces themselves, you'll see on one side there'll be a set of arrows, and in between the arrows it'll say place on fold or on fold. That's how you know that side of the pattern piece is going to be placed right on the fold. And it's the same thing for any of the other pieces here. Now you're going to want to make sure before you go ahead and pin and cut out your fabric pieces that you're going to want to pre-treat your fabric. Pre-treating your fabric is important because if you do not wash or treat your fabric beforehand, it could shrink after you make your garment, and you don't want that to happen. For more information, check out our video on pre-treating fabric on ProfessorPincushion.com. As you can see, my pattern pieces are laid out in my fabric such as they are on the diagram. You'll notice some of the pattern pieces where the writing is face down towards the fabric. That's fine as long as the edge that says center fold is placed on the fold of the fabric. So I have my fabric folded in half with the wrong side facing up. So if I lift this up, you'll see the right side of the fabric. In order to pin this, I'm going to take my straight pins and I'm going to pin them parallel to the edge of the fabric. The reason why I do this is because I like to make sure that when I'm cutting out with my scissors, they're not going to get in the way of my scissors. So they're just right along the edge of the pattern piece. I usually like to start at one end, in this case the fold, and then smooth out my pattern piece and kind of work my way out this way. Once it's all pinned, you're going to want to cut this out just like you did with your pattern pieces, right along the edge of the black line. And you're also going to want to cut out all your notches that you had before. It's very important that we keep these notches onto our fabric. So now that it's all pinned, I'm going to go ahead and cut all this out. The one thing that you have to be careful of is when you're cutting out your piece, you don't cut on the side where the fold is. That's because when we unfold it, we're going to have one big piece of number 5. So I would just take my scissors and cut along this edge and all around these edges while leaving this edge alone. Before you remove your straight pins from your pattern piece and taking the pattern piece off your fabric, you're definitely going to want to look over all your pattern pieces and see if there are any markings that need to be transferred to your fabric. Usually you'll see a circle, either a big circle or a little circle, and what this is a placement of something. So it's very important that you transfer it to your fabric. Now I looked over 1, 2, 5, and 6 and there's no circles. If there were, what I would do is I would take a straight pin, put it through the middle of the circle, just pretend there's a circle there, through the fabric, flip it over to the other side, and use my fabric marker to mark that area. Then because I like to do it on both sides, since this is folded in half, I would carefully keep the pin there, lift the tissue paper, and then mark it right there. But like I said, I don't have any here. What I do have though, I have these lines which indicate where we're going to have pleats in the bottom half of our mini dress. So with using the same concept, I'm going to take my straight pin, I'm going to place it at the top of the line, and then take another one, place it at the bottom of the line, flip this over. It might be hard to see, but I have a pin sticking up here and sticking up here. My fabric marker or fabric chalk, if that's what you have, whatever you can use to see. And I'm going to mark it right where that pin is coming out. I'm going to leave those there. Carefully lift up my tissue paper and again mark my fabric. Now once it's marked, I want to have that line there. I'm going to take these pins out. I'm going to get my sewing gauge and I'm going to line up those 2 marks and draw a line. I'm going to do this for the other side too. And I'm going to do the same step for each one of these lines, even the dotted ones. The reason why these are dotted is because they're eventually going to have you match up this line with this line. which we'll get to when we get to that part of making our pleats. So you're going to do this for pattern piece 1 and also for pattern piece 2. Once your fabric pieces have been cut out and marked, now it's time to get to the fun part, which is putting the dress together. So the first thing you want to do is pull out your pattern directions, which I have here. And you're going to look at the fabric guide. If you've never used pattern directions, this is very important. Right up here they have a key, which relates to the pictures they show below. So right here it's more of a solid color. This represents the right side of the fabric. So here we have it, and we're looking at the right side of our fabric piece. If it's white, that's the wrong side of the fabric. So you can see it here, and you'll see a little bit of the right side being folded over. And then you have this white hatched pattern, which has like pound signs on it. This represents interfacing, which in this particular case we don't really have to worry about since it's only for the belt. So now that we got that clear, we're going to start looking at the actual directions. And what's common with most of them is you'll see a picture representing what's going on, and then they'll put a few sentences either above it or on the side of it what is going on in this picture. So you have a picture and then you have written directions. So whatever one works best for you, they cover both of them. Next, the directions are usually numbered. So they go in numerical order, so it's easy to follow along. So then once I get to the end of this page, which is 8, I then have to look for another page or on the back of the page until I find number 9. The thing that you have to be careful of is you need to make sure that number 1 actually goes to what view you're working on. So even though this says sewing instructions for mini dress view A and B and tunic C, it starts number 1 with yoke A. This means the dress A. If I'm doing dress B, I have to go past all this. So I'm going through all this is all for A, until I find yoke B here. Now if you're doing the dress B and the tunic C, these directions go for both of those since they're so similar. That's why they have both here. So now that we found ours, we're going to get a closer look so we can see what our first step is going to be in making our dress. Now that we're at the beginning of our pattern directions relating to dress B, we're going to see what we're going to be working on next. Now you can open up your pieces and see what they look like so you know what you're working with. Another clue is here is saying yoke, so that means we're working with the yoke pieces. And if I remove this and we actually look at the pattern piece themselves, again they say yoke, which is helpful because again if we look at this is actually not numbered anymore. This is why I like to keep my pattern pieces attached to my fabric pieces until I'm ready to use them. So everything's labeled. And in this case, we're only working with 4 pieces, so it's a little bit easier. But in other cases, when you're making something that has several pieces, it just helps to keep things organized so you don't get confused. So we're going to be working with piece number 5, which says yoke, and also piece number 6, which also says yoke. So as you see here, there's 2 pieces. So one of them is 5, one of them is 6. So the first set of directions says stay stitch neck edges 1/2 inch from cut edges of yoke front and sleeve and yoke back and sleeve in the directions of the arrow. Now the reason why we're doing stay stitching, which it says right here, is that it helps prevent the stretching of curves. So in fabric where it's kind of stretchy like knits or there's an open weave, there is a problem with somehow the collar or curved area getting distorted. So stay stitching really helps. But I normally do stay stitching no matter what type of fabric I'm working with, just because it's helpful no matter what. So what we're going to do, using a regular stitch, we're going to either start at this end or we're going to start at this end. And then we're going to just work our way from one end to the other. And you're going to do this for both pieces 5 and 6. So I'm going to open up my pieces so you can see them, and then I'll go over it again. Here I have my 2 pieces, 5 and 6. So I've taken off the pattern pieces, unfolded the fabric, and this is what I get, which looks similar to this diagram right here. Now you'll notice that one is bigger than the other one. This is the bigger one. That's because this is the back. So if you have one that's bigger, it's fine. As long as you were careful cutting it out, I'm sure everything is great. The one thing that I want to point out is you're not at this point stitching these pieces together. When you're stay stitching, it's one single layer of fabric. So this one, I'm stitching from here or from here, whatever side is more comfortable, a 1/2 inch from this edge right here, all the way around this collar part. And then on this one, from here, stitching all the way around here. Again, both of them are a 1/2 inch from this edge. So you're just going to use your sewing gauge and measure till you hit the 1/2 inch mark, and then you're going to find the line on your sewing machine guide to keep aligned with that. So now I'm going to break out the sewing machine so we can start with our stay stitching. Since the directions have indicated that this stitch is not going to be removed, at the edge of where I'm starting at, I'm definitely going to do a couple of back stitches. Now once I do this back stitches, I can go ahead and go forward 1/2 inch from the edge, regular stitches, and all along the neckline of the front and back yoke. Once this part is done, then we can move on to attaching those two pieces together. Alright, now we're ready to move on to step 15, and we're going to focus on the first half of the step first. So the directions say, with right sides together, pin the yoke front and sleeve to yoke back and sleeve, back at the shoulder and underarm seams, matching cut edges and notches. Stitch the shoulder seam and underarm seams. And here we have some pictures. This is view B and view C, which is the one with the longer sleeves, but we're doing this one. They're essentially the same though. So what we're going to do, and you'll see this is all white, so this is showing the wrong side. I'm going to take my two pieces that I just stay stitched, and I'm going to match them here at the shoulders and here underneath, which is the bottom of the sleeves. You're going to make sure that the right side of the prints are facing each other, and then we're going to stitch right along here, 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 and here. Now what they're saying is you want to match the edges together, and these notches, if you cut them out correctly, should also match. So now I'm going to show you how I do that in a practical sense. So here I have my two yoke pieces. I have the front and I have the back, with the right side of the fabric facing up towards us. So I'm going to take my front, I'm just going to move this up so it stays in the middle more. And then I'm going to take my front, lay it over my back, and I'm going to pin here at the shoulder, here at the shoulder, and these two spots down here at the bottom of the sleeve. So once I have this pinned, I'm then going to take it to my sewing machine so I can go ahead and do a regular stitch right along these two edges. I'm going to make my seam 5/8 of an inch away from the edge, and I know that because in the pattern directions it says all seam allowance are 5/8 of an inch unless otherwise indicated. It also states this on the pattern pieces themselves. So here I'm starting at the bottom of my sleeve, so away from this edge here, my stitching line is going to go 5/8 of an inch in there, and I'm doing just a regular stitch, whatever's normal for your machine. Don't forget to do a couple of back stitches, and then going till I get to the edge. And I'm going to do this for all 4 spots. Now number 15, you'll see that the pattern directions go on, and it states to also finish your seams. And what this means is, at this point, after you do your stitching, you could just press your seams open. But what happens is the edges of your fabric will eventually start to fray if you have fabric that tends to do that. Also doesn't look as professional with a finished seam. So I'm going to show you one example on how you can do that. So here I have my seam at the 5/8 inch mark. I'm going to switch my machine to a zigzag stitch, and then I'm going to do a zigzag right on the edge with these two pieces of fabric still together, and do it right along the edge. If you have an overlock stitch on your machine, you can also do this. And on the simplicity directions, they give you other ways that you can finish it. This is just one way. And the zigzag stitch really helps and keeping your fabrics from fraying any further. And then once you finish doing this, you then take it to your ironing board and you can press it so all the seams are going one way, which I'll show you in the next step. Ironing is a very important step in making your clothes look professional. So here I have my shoulder, which I just did my seam, and I'm going to pull it over to one side. So since I did the zigzag stitch and my stitches are together, I'm just gonna pull it over instead of pressing it open. Then I'm gonna take my iron and carefully iron across the seam. And I'm gonna do this for all four seams that I have just made. I also like to do the right side of the fabric as soon as I finish doing on the wrong side first, just so I can make sure that it all looks nice and neat and clean. Okay, we're at step 16 now. It says open out one long edge of single fold bias tape and lightly press. So I have my package of bias tape here, the single fold. I'm going to unravel this a bit. So you'll see your bias tape has a fold here on the top and a fold on the bottom. What this is saying is you're going to take it to your ironing board and you're going to open up one of these folds so that it's flat, and you're going to lightly press it. So this means you don't want a super hot iron and you don't want to press it until this crease here where the fold was completely disappears. This crease is going to help when we stitch it onto our yoke. So that's why you just want to have it open but still keep the crease. So I'm going to go ahead, take this to my ironing board, and once it's open, that's great. And I think on the package it comes with about 4 yards of bias tape. Since this is going just right along the neck edge, you're obviously not going to need all 4 yards. So maybe start with 2 so you don't have to press the whole thing open, and go from there. And then once this is done, we're going to move on to step 17. So now we have the bias tape with the one side pressed open. The one side where we still have the fold, that's facing up towards me. So this is the wrong side of the bias tape. If I flip this over and I don't see the fold now, or the edge with the fold, this is the right side of the bias tape. So for right now, we're gonna have it with the wrong side facing up. So what directions are telling us in number 17 is you're gonna take the edge of the bias tape and you're gonna fold it a 1/2 inch in from the edge. So again, the wrong side of the bias tape is facing us, and then it's folded over onto itself a 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to use my sewing gauge. I'm going to measure this. It could be done a little bit more, and that should be a 1/2 inch. All right, so once this is a 1/2 inch folded over, what we're going to do next, and what the directions tell us, is you're going to place this edge of the fold here right at the shoulder seam. It doesn't matter which one. They're starting here with the left one on the back, and you're going to place it right, and you're going to pin it, and then you're going to pin it all the way around until you get to the other side of the yoke. Now once you meet the other side, you're going to overlap the edges about a 1/2 inch, and then you can trim off the edge of the bias tape. So you just have what you need. Now the other important step, which they put in the directions, is you want this crease, this original crease that you had pressed out, placed 3/8 of an inch away from the edge of this neck edge right here. Now why you're going to do that is you're then going to stitch a 3/8 inch seam allowance, which means that your stitch should end right in the middle of that crease there. So I'm going to go ahead and start pinning, starting from one shoulder, making it all the way around, overlapping a 1/2 inch, and making sure that my crease is 3/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric. I've already started pinning my bias tape to the top edge of my yoke here along the neckline. So as you can see, the edge of the bias tape here is not lining up with the edge of the fabric. The main thing I want to make sure is that the crease itself is 3/8 of an inch away from the edge of the top of the fabric here. So that's why it's sticking up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning this, and I'm using my sewing gauge at the 3/8 inch mark in order to match up the edge of the fabric with my crease. And you'll notice that I'm putting my straight pins in perpendicular to the edge of the fabric. The reason I do this, and I do this for whenever I'm pinning any of my things together, I always have my pin sticking out like this, is because when I'm stitching at my sewing machine, it makes it easier for me to remove my pins as I'm sewing. If I go like this, it's definitely a lot harder. So I only have it parallel when I'm attaching my pattern pieces to my fabric. Other than that, I have it like that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish doing this. And the only thing I want to point out further, here's the beginning of my bias tape on my shoulder, which I've lined up on the seam, and it's folded over. So now when I get to this point, I'm just going to make sure that it overlaps another 1/2 inch. Pin that into place. And then at this point, we're going to take it to the sewing machine so that we can go ahead and stitch right in the middle of that crease there. So when I stitch right in that crease, I'm just going to do a regular stitch, and you're doing a 3/8 seam allowance, like I said before, which should put you right in the middle of that crease. So you're just going to go all the way around the neck collar, and then we're going to move on to the next step, which is finishing it up. After you finish stitching your bias tape to the neckline of your yoke, what you're going to do next is you're going to trim and clip your curves. So I've already started this on this half. What that means is here we have the edge of the fabric, here we have the edge of the bias tape. I'm going to cut off all this fabric that's sticking off the top of the bias tape so it's all evenly lined up. After I finish doing that, as you can see over here, I'm going to cut little inverted notches into my seam, but be very careful not to cut directly into your seam. You want to keep the triangles right above them, because if you accidentally clip your seam, you're going to create a hole. That's why you have to be careful. I place these little notches about 1 inch apart. So you're going to finish clipping all this off and then doing your little notches, and then we can move on to step 18. Directions number 18 says turn the tape to the inside and press in place. So here again, I have my bias tape. What I'm going to do is right along where I stitched, where that crease is, I'm going to fold up, and then I'm going to fold over to the inside of my yoke. So you're not really going to see any bias tape on the right side of your garment. It's now all on the wrong side. So if you feel more comfortable, you can go ahead and put straight pins just to hold it, or you could kind of fold it and press it at the ironing board itself, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and take it and press it, and then we'll be back for the rest of directions 18. I've turned my yoke inside out for this next step, hand based close to the turned edge of tape. So here I have my bias tape on the inside of my garment, and at this point you have a choice. They say to hand baste towards the turned edge, which is up here, so you can baste or do a running stitch right along the top here, and what you're doing is using your basting stitch as a guideline for the next step, which is top stitching. I personally want to put my basting stitch down here just so I can keep this bias tape lying flat against the top of my garment. So in order to do a hand basting stitch, you're going to take your threaded needle that's knotted on the end, and then you're going to come up from just the inside of the bias tape here to hide the knot, and then you're going to go down, and that can be a pretty big stitch. It's a basting stitch, so it's going to come out as soon as we finish the top stitching. So you're going to go down through all layers. So this is the bias tape and also the fabric. So I have my stitch there, and then I'm going to come up a little ways away from that through all layers again, and up and down until I go all the way around the neck. So if I have my basting stitch down here, once I do my top stitch, that means on the right side of my garment, I'm going to have 2 rows of stitches. I have my stay stitching, which is going to be towards the top, and then I'm going to have a second row of top stitching, which is going to be a little ways below that. So that's the nice thing about sewing. You can definitely create your own look and do things that are going to be unique for you. It's going to be the same set of rules if you do it up here as well. You're going to do the same basting stitch, and then once we finish this, we're going to take it to the machine and we're going to do a top stitching using our basting stitch as a guideline on the other side, so we have something to follow. The top stitch is just a regular width stitch, and you're going to go all the way around the yoke, following right alongside the basting stitch that you just did. So this top stitch is actually going to permanently hold the bias tape to the inside of the collar. That's what the basting stitch is doing now. But once we put in the top stitch, we no longer need the basting stitch, so you can remove it. This is why it's fine, since the basting stitch is a temporary stitch, that you can use a non-matching thread. So it's a little bit easier when you're removing it to see it and to be able to take it out. So after we finish this part, then we're going to move on to working on the sleeves. Next, we're moving on to working on the sleeve. So here I have my yoke again, inside out. Here's the collar, the bottom of the yoke, and this is the sleeve. So number 19 says, press up sleeve hem, forming a crease. It doesn't say how much to fold it up, but if we refer back to your original pattern piece, which I still have right here, it says 5/8 inch hem allowed. So that means that we're going to fold each of the sleeves over 5/8 of an inch. So I would use my sewing gauge to measure it, and then once it's the correct measurement, stick in a straight pin, and I would go all the way around on both sleeves. Then you just take it to the ironing board and you press this. Once you're done with that, we'll move on to the next part of making the hem for the sleeve. To form a narrow hem, tuck under the raw edge to meet the crease. So here I have the hem of my sleeve. I'm going to start removing some of my straight pins. Since I pressed it, it should stay. And the raw edge here, I'm going to fold it under like this, pretty much in half, so that the edge here meets the crease here on the outside of the sleeve. Once I have that, I then put a straight pin in, and I'm going to do this again all the way around, and I'm going to press it. Here I have my other sleeve already done. So once you have it pressed and it's lying nice and flat like that, you're then going to take it to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch right along this top folded edge right there. So doing the stitch along the hem, you're just going to do a regular width stitch. And again, you're going to go as close to the edge as you can without going over. Once this part is done, then we are done with the sleeves and we're going to move on to the bottom half of the dress. Moving right along, we're now going to work on the bottom half of the dress or tunic. So the next direction says to make soft pleats in front, on outside fold along solid lines near center, bringing folds to broken lines, pin. The pleats will lap at the upper edge. So I'm going to remove this and we're going to look now at our actual pattern just because it's easier to see the lines. So these lines should have already been transferred to your fabric piece. You have your solid lines, you have your broken lines. What you have to be careful is that right here at the very edge, there's another broken line. So you definitely want to transfer this one. Just start here at the top and then move your way to the bottom. I'm going to show you how to do this using this one as an example, but it's best to start in the center and then work your way out. Now, for the real fabric piece, it's going to be twice this size because this is just the pattern piece that has been placed on the fold, so it's only half of the bottom half of the dress. So in reality, you should have 6 pleats. Well, there's actually one big one or 2 small ones in the center, 2 on the outside and 2 on the outer side of that. So here we have our broken line, here we have our dotted line. So I'm going to take the solid line and I'm going to bring it until I get to the dotted line. I'm going to pinch it in my fingers like this, and then I'm going to pin it. And that's all there is to it. So you're going to do this for each one of your pleats on your fabric, not on your pattern, of course. And let me just show you the back. So here's the extra folded part in the back. I'm just folding it outward. So if this were on the other side of the center, I would fold it to the right. So here we have the solid and the dotted. We just bring it together like this, and then you fold it. Obviously it's a lot easier with fabric because it's softer to work with, but you get the idea. So here I have the excess. I'm folding it towards the left, and then I just pin it. So now I'll show you what it looks like on my actual fabric piece. So here we have the skirt, and you'll see we have the center pleats right here. They meet in the middle, and then we have the ones on the outside. So the next step is we're gonna baste, and we're gonna do it on the machine since this is faster, right along the top here in order to hold these pleats in place, so then we can remove the pins and move on to the next step. So you're gonna do it for both the front and the back portion of the bottom half of the dress or tunic. So when basting, you want your width length to be as long as possible. Just doing big stitches, you don't even have to worry about back stitching because this stitch will eventually be coming out. It's just to hold the pleats into place. And you don't have to do this the whole top length of that bottom half of the dress. You just need to do it where the pleats are. So I'm gonna do this for both of them. And then we're gonna work on putting these two halves together. If we look at direction number 23, it says with right sides together, pin the front to back at side seams, matching cut edges and notches. Stitch side seams and finish them. So here I have the front, or the back, I'm sorry, of the bottom half of my dress. This is the top, this is the bottom, and these are the two sides. So I'm then going to get my front, and I'm going to lay it in the same direction. And it's a little hard with the pleats. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin the side seams from the top here all the way down to the bottom. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side over here. So once these are pinned, you're going to then take it to the sewing machine and you're going to do a seam just as you did with the shoulder seams in the beginning. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin this side and pin this side. So all you're doing is just the sides, and you're not worrying about the top or the bottom yet. We're now going to stitch our side seam. Don't forget to do a couple of back stitches at the top and bottom on each side. And it's the 5/8 seam allowance. And I'm just doing a regular stitch. So when I'm done doing this, I'm then going to do the finishing the seam by doing the zigzag on the edge, or any other method that you prefer, and then you're going to press it all to one side just like we did for the shoulder seams. So I'm going to finish doing this side and then that side, and then we get the fun part of attaching this bottom to our yoke. Now moving on to step number 24, with the right sides together, pin yoke to front and back, matching the cut edges, centers, and underarm seams. Stitch seam. So here I have my yoke. Here I have my front and back, which are stitched on the sides. And this one is inside out. This one, the right side is out. We need to place them right side to right side. And what you need to pay attention to now is we have our notches that we cut into the bottom of our yoke. So I have a notch here, and I have one here. The bigger one indicates it's the back of the yoke. That's how you can tell this is the front and this is the back. Since this notch is smaller, this was a single notch, I made this one bigger. This is the double notch. It's the same thing with the bottom half of your dress. Here I have a bigger one. This is the back of the dress, And here I have a smaller one. This is the front of the dress. So I'm going to stick my yoke inside this part. And now, right side to right side, I'm going to match the notches and I'm going to pin it. So this is the bottom of the yoke to the top of the skirt part of the dress. So all the notches need to line up. I have to play with this to get this in there. So this is all going to be pinned all along here. And then when I get to the other notch, I'm going to pin that. Then the other thing you want to match up is the bottom seam of the sleeve matches up with the side seam that we just put in of the top of the skirt here. So then this is going to be pinned, and you're going to do the same thing on this side. So I'm going to go all the way around back to this side, and again I'm going to match up my front notch of my yoke with my front notch of my skirt. So I'm going to pin this as well and do the same thing over on this side. So once this is all pinned up, you're then going to take it to your sewing machine, and we're just going to do a 5/8 inch seam allowance all along this edge. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch all the way around, attaching the yoke to the bottom half of the dress. And this is actually going to be in two parts, because we're first going to stitch at our 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around, and then you're going to go back, and where the side seams are, you're then going to stitch again just in those two areas right underneath the armpit, just to reinforce that area. And that's what it says in the directions next. So I'm just going to finish this and then we'll do that part next. To reinforce our seams at the side seam, you're going to locate your side seam, and I'm just going to pull this until I get to the notch. So I'm going to stitch over my seam I just made, the exact same stitch from this notch going past the side seam allowance here till I get to my other notch. So I would stop right here. Don't forget to back stitch on both sides. So I'm going to do this for both side seams, and this just makes this area a little stronger. So do a couple of stitches and then back stitch, and just do as well as you can. You might have to slow down a little bit so you can make sure you get right on top of that stitch there. And then once I finish up on the other side, we are going to clip some of those notches into the curved areas, which is going to be this area right here. And then all we have left is to do the hem of our dress, and then we're finished. The last step to direction number 24 is to cut out your little notches like I started doing here, which is the inverted triangles, and then you want to press all of this towards your yoke. So here's my yoke, here's my skirt, and I'm just going to press all of this towards here so it'll lie nice and flat. And then we're going to move on to the last step, which is doing the hem. Step number 25 states, press up hem allowance on lower edge of dress or tunic, press under 1/4 inch on the raw edge, pin hem in place and stitch close to the upper pressed edge. So here I have the bottom part of my dress, and I have it inside out again, and I'm going to use my sewing gauge to fold this up 1¼ inches, and use my sewing gauge to measure this to make sure it's accurate, and then I'm going to pin it. And the reason why I know it's 1¼ is because I looked at the bottom of the pattern piece and it said 1¼ inch hem allowed. So that you can always look to your pattern pieces in order to get additional information if the pattern directions do not state it. So as soon as I pin this all the way around the bottom of the dress or tunic, if that's what you're doing, you're then, just like you did with the sleeve, going to press it so we have a nice crisp edge here on the corner. And then we're going to come back And at the top, we're gonna fold this under 1/4 of an inch. So then we'll have a nice clean edge on top as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish doing this, pressing it, and then start working on pressing under additional 1/4 inch. So here I have my hem, and it's been pressed under 1/4 of an inch. And just like we did for the sleeve, you're going to stitch as close to this top edge as you can and go all the way around. After this is done, the only thing left to do is to remove your basting stitch and cut any loose threads that you have sticking out. And then it's ready for you to wear it. Good job! We finished. So here is the finished dress. Mini dress B from Simplicity 2147, and it came out really cute. I can't wait to wear it. If you're feeling like you want to add a little something, I highly recommend doing the belt, which is also in the same pattern envelope. But it's cute on its own too. So go ahead and give it a try.